All right, we are live, and as usual, people will miss the introduction if they come in 10 seconds late. But I am Virginia Karnstein with Forrest Gren, and today on Wailing and Gnashing, we are joined by Holly Friend. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Holly writes at Recurring Character, which is we were just talking about, Forrest and I find it addictive to read. So we're definitely going to get into that in depth going into this. Probably not as much depth as it deserves because there's a lot of different characters. Um, but it's such a fascinating project, and as soon as I came across it, I was like, we have to have Holly on Wailing and Gnashing. Um, so we always start off with a question, though. What have you been reading, watching, or listening to lately?
Mm. Yeah, embarrassingly, I haven't been reading a lot. I've been really struggling to read, which I do think is like happening with a lot of people right now. I literally saw like a Substack note today that was like a basket of apples with like one bite out of each apple, and it was someone saying like, "This is how I'm reading at the moment," and that's literally how it feels. I can see right now like the books underneath my like bookshelf. It's like the currently reading books, and there's like 7 of them, and they all have a bookmark like a few pages in. I have been like dipping in and out of like a like Philip Roth reader book, which is like yeah, like my friend bought me as a present like a year ago, which has been really enjoyable, but yeah, quite big and hefty and funny. But like I've been dipping in and out of that for a while. But probably what I've been doing most, to be honest, is watching Love Island.
Okay, yeah.
The latest series of the British Love Island, um, which is my first time watching for about 8 years. The last time I watched uh, the series was I was like 25 and like the same age as the contestants, and it's very interesting now. I found to watch it with like a whole new generation of young people dating and having these like very interesting gender dynamics and friendship dynamics that are like playing out on screen. Um, yeah, so I've been spending quite a lot of time watching that, which is probably not the best thing for my brain, but maybe also like the rest it needs.
Mhm. I honestly didn't know that Love Island had been going on for like I feel like I've only seen stuff about it in the last like couple of years. I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I didn't realize it had been like an established thing for very long. Forrest, have you ever watched the show?
I have not, no.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
I just see like a lot of content about it. Like I've read stuff about Love Island. I haven't actually watched it though for some reason. Um, I guess because I don't. I've been watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it took me like a month to get through season one. So
Yeah.
like, I'm a pretty slow watcher of anything. Um, but yeah, it seems like when reading your newsletter, you definitely have like a varied taste in media. So I can imagine like on the one hand Philip Roth, on the other hand reality
Mm.
TV. Like that makes total sense vibes wise, and
yeah.
we love it.
And some
So
cinema, but yeah, again, like now it's summer, I'm like not going to the cinema as much. But I do like film, and I'm trying to see more. I feel like there's a lot of like historical like cult films I haven't seen that are very important for recurring character, to kind of understand all the different eras of the archetypes I'm exploring. So yeah, I do try to get to the cinema as much as I can.
Mhm.
do you have like a particular movie that you're looking forward to seeing sometime soon?
Well, I actually haven't seen Backrooms or Obsession yet, which I was resisting for some reason. Maybe partly because I don't like horror. Like I'm quite scared, and yeah, I don't tend to enjoy those sorts of films. But the amount of like cultural discourse I've been seeing about both of them, I'm like, oh, I need. It's important for my job to like see these films, and I might
Yeah.
not write about them because I mean like everyone is writing about them, particularly Obsession. But yeah, I mean like dating dynamics and relationships are like a really big interest of mine and come up a lot through recurring character and through like the fiction writing I do and this sort of thing. So I think Obsession particularly feels like an important film for me to see. But yeah, I think I'm going to see it this week in the daytime and like hopefully not get scared.
Yeah. I've had at least 2 people ask me to watch it, and I'm like, I'll wait till it's like free somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Backrooms. I feel like the most discoursey movies, at least in my social media spheres, have been Backrooms, Obsession, and The Odyssey right now. Like, just like scrolling through Substack notes today, it was just like 10 straight notes on The Odyssey. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I would be more excited to see it because I studied ancient Greek stuff a lot if there weren't so much discourse. Like, I feel like I'm being funneled toward it, and I'm like resisting. I'm very like Gen X about this funnel, you know.
I know what you mean. I kind of want to see stuff that like I feel like that's a bit of a like pick me girl energy, but I'm like I want to see stuff that no one else is seeing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just sort of maybe the return of like 80s, 90s vibe, like rebellious artistic consumption. I don't know. Because I feel like there's, yeah, I kind of have the same thing. There are certain TV shows that I haven't watched that it's just because people recommended it to me too often. Like I think you're a Mad Men fan. And I haven't seen it because a particularly annoying guy kept telling me to watch it. And again, I mean, I think we were talking about this, but like I am a slow TV viewer, so like if it's longer than a miniseries, I'm probably gonna shy away from it. But that's just my lack of patience. A movie's kind of over in 2 hours, and a show can go on for, you know, a lot longer than that. But
a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, really. I've been watching some video essays recently about like police TV shows. And some of those shows are on for like decades, like multiple decades. And I'm like, the show has been on as long as I've been alive. How am I supposed to know who all the characters are? You know? Or like how this one came in when that one got phased out or whatever. Anyway, we're very familiar with your work. How would you describe your project, your newsletter?
Yeah, so my project is called Recurring Character, and I guess it exists right now on Substack as a kind of landing space. I do think it is going to grow out of Substack or like, you know, into other places as well. It's already kind of become a podcast, which is available on Substack, but also Apple, Spotify, etc. And it's interesting too because adding the podcast element, and I've been having guests on as well, does turn it from being this kind of like very personal, I guess like self-controlled world narrative that I'm building into something that is more of a collective world building project, which is also very exciting. But yeah, the premise of it is essentially it's about the roles that people keep playing in culture and in everyday life. So yeah, it is essentially a place for me to track, analyze, and ultimately archive character archetypes that are reappearing again throughout time and throughout different forms of media. So this could be in literature or cinema, TV. It could be in pop culture, celebrity culture. It could be in real life observation, anecdotes from friends, this sort of thing. It's an interdisciplinary project in some way, but essentially, a place to analyze and archive these characters that I guess allow me to hone in on something really like specific that is usually either kind of like inspiring me or like threatening me, like something that really is like feels very important to me on a personal level or cultural and personal level. But what I like to do is focus in on why it's kind of like so making me so obsessed, and then I kind of zoom out and look at like all the culture around it and what it's telling us about like how people are living relating to each other, acting, thinking, creating today, and also some predictions about like what that could mean for tomorrow, because I actually have a background in trends and futures, which kind of makes its way into the project as well.
And the background, if I'm remembering correctly, is in fashion.
Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking about this and like when the kind of genesis of recurring character started, or my interest in pattern spotting and observation began. And yeah, I studied fashion buying, which is like the least creative. Sorry to fashion buyers, but I think I discovered quite quickly is like not my jam. And I was much more interested in like the fashion theory and why people wear what they wear, buy what they buy, and what that tells us about like the time we're living in, as well as all of the kind of historical references too. So I did end up doing my dissertation on like goth trends and like people essentially, adopting how goth fashion has kind of been commercialized, and the streak of like quote unquote darkness that this potentially gives you, and what that says about people in whatever year that was, 2016. And then I studied fashion, but then I kind of went into trend forecasting. So I then like applied this. I was working for a trend forecasting agency for nearly 6 years, and I could then apply this kind of interest I had, burgeoning interest in like pattern spotting, observation, analyzing, to everything that wasn't fashion. So that could be like technology, entertainment, food and drink, luxury, beauty, travel and hospitality. And that was a bit of a crash course in like how to like narrative build around these trends and start to think about what that means for like the future, rather than what that's just saying about what's happening today. So I think the kind of recurring character has always been slightly there, because the longer I was in it, the more I realized I actually wasn't that interested in like businesses or brands, which the trend forecasting industry is kind of built around. Like it's built as a money make, or not money maker, but like it's the services are sold to brands in order to create new products, market new products, reach people, etc. I was less interested in that and more interested in like the human behavior and like what sort of like generational or cultural differences were coming out, and anomalies in consumer behavior that I felt like were really different to the kind of main narratives that we were being taught in like media or society. And that was I think that's probably kind of what led me into creating this project.
That makes a lot of sense. Like that makes a lot of sense of where you're coming from, and also where like where the project is going toward, I guess.
And sense making, I think, actually is a term that I've only recently been using, but I think it is also an exercise in sense making. It's like a way for me to make sense of the world and like what I see around me, which is, I guess, why everyone writes, is to like make sense of things. But yeah, so I feel like it's somewhat a personal tool for me to make sense of things, but also, like I said, hopefully becomes this like collective world building tool that allows us to imagine or like create a bit of a mythology about like the contemporary times we're living in that we maybe are not seeing in like film or books. I feel like they're not really like summing up like the current moment, or like telling us interesting things about the current moment that we can then look back on in years time and be like, oh, I really understand what 2025 was about, or like what different tribes or trends or character types were emerging in that time. So I wanted to create, I guess, like a bit of an archive that can do that.
I mean, that's exactly what I pick up on, and that's why it's so interesting. And it's also interesting, and I'll hand off the question to Forrest because she had been wondering about this. But it's interesting that to some extent, recurring character is stereotyping, but it doesn't feel like stereotyping in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's almost just like typing. And so when I'm reading something or listening to like The Loser, for instance, it's like I don't feel like it's, you know, dumping on the loser. It almost reads like a love letter to this type that most people are kind of like annoyed by. And a lot of them are that way. They're people that are stereotypically kind of annoying, like the branded couple. A lot of people are a little bit put off by that.
Mhm.
But it's not stereotyping in the sense of like I'm the not like other girls. I'm the N-log looking at these, you know, popular you know, it doesn't give a resentful vibe at all. And that's very interesting to me. I don't know if there is resentment that's being deleted in the drafts, but,
There probably
Forrest,
is, actually. I think I like.
well,
I think I'm drawn to like ironic writing. Like all my favorite authors are like ironists. So I think like I also have this like veneer of, maybe not veneer, this like tone of irony. So like if I'm resentful of something, I'm aware that I'm resentful and I'm like making fun of that or like questioning it or being like, okay, what about this person? Why am I so bitter about this person? What's it like saying about me? What are the kind of inherent biases that I have that I can explore on the page or in the podcast?
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the stuff, I mean, another big one that you covered, I think across 2 podcast episodes, was the femcel. And a lot of people are deeply annoyed by either femcels or like femcel core or post femcels, you know. But Forrest, you'd had a question that you wanted to ask about types and typing. I was wondering if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, so when you were talking about character types, it reminded me of kind of that kind of the more Jungian concept of like the archetype, where it's like a bigger force that something can fit within, but that you also move between. It's not like a definition of who you are as a person. And I wondered if you felt like that was like an accurate comparison to how you perceive the typing of characters, or if you feel like that's not really comparable.
Yeah, I think so. I think that hits the nail on the head, actually. And it's funny, it was only later in the project that the term archetype came to me. I was like, oh wait, these are archetypes. And I think the reason is that I've not had any like formal training or education in like literary theory or psychology or sociology, and wasn't really that aware of like Jungian archetypes. It's actually my therapist who was like, oh, so you're doing this about Jungian archetypes? I was like, no. What are you talking about? I had to Google it and I was like, oh shit, like he stole my idea. So that's also fun, I think, because that's something that I'm now like, oh cool, that's like a whole nother area that I can immerse myself in at some point. Same with like even like tarot archetypes. I've been learning tarot recently, and I'm like, oh, this is there's so much like content here for me to like my like very, you know, age old wisdom for me to compare to the, you know, the current archetype of the Fool or whatever it is. So yeah, I think I definitely do. It's interesting that you brought up like the idea of stereotyping as well, because I was actually thinking about like how this project came about, or like when I was planning it, like how it ended up taking this form, especially because I wasn't even considering archetypes as a concept. And actually, I was thinking back to a residency that I was at last year, where I think this is probably where I had the initial idea. And I remember writing the word tropes on a Post-it and just being really like set on this word and being really like interested in this word because it's considered often quite negative. Like we think of tropes as being kind of like very, like writing by numbers or like creating by numbers and not actually very original. But I do remember, I remember having a very interesting like critique session with some people at the residency, where I'd presented a piece of writing which was I guess drawing on kind of gender dynamics in the way that I'm very interested in. And it was about kind of the way women view and like mythologize men. And yeah, someone, quite a young artist, was basically like, oh, like, you're using stereotypes here, you need to be careful. Like, you know, that was her kind of critique for me. And I remember coming back from the session and being really like angry and inspired, and being like, wait, but like, why is that a bad thing? Like, and I think it really enraged me, but it also made me like, I think that probably gave me like the idea, because then I was like, oh no, but like there's a reason that these things exist, and like, let's talk about why, and let's understand them and see why they come up again and again and again in culture and in stories and in like our everyday lived reality. So yeah, I think cliches and stereotypes, and actually I'm going to be exploring with a friend in an upcoming podcast episode the idea of like the stop character, or the two-dimensional character, and how two-dimensional people or characters can actually have like a really important role to play in storytelling, but also maybe in personalities. Like, we were just talking at the beginning of the conversation about like the like our current social media era of like narcissism and diarists gone mad. So like my first character piece was about the diarist, who's like a person who mythologizes themselves and mines their life for content, which I think we're all very aware of. But actually it feels like we're moving into this era where being kind of quite shallow, and actually being like, oh, I'm actually not that deep. Like, I actually don't have, you know, I'm not interested in over analyzing myself, almost being a kind of a status symbol, or a way that frees us from a lot of the constraints of contemporary digital life.
It's interesting. I mean, tarot makes a lot of sense, because that's kind of the vibe I get now. That as soon as you said learning tarot, I was like, oh yeah, the loser is a card. You know, that makes a lot of sense to me. Another thing was when archetypes do come up in the project, I'm trying to remember exactly. I think you started out, so like there's the different recurring characters, and then they fit into a meta layer of archetypes, right? That came along a little bit later in the project. And I think you started with 5 and then added a 6th, is that correct? I'm bad with numbers.
Yeah, I think I've been adding them here and there. it's not been as formalized as it should be. But yeah, that was essentially a categorization system to, you know, on a very basic level, to compare whether they are a hero, a villain, an anti-hero, a narrator, a love interest, a sidekick, an NPC. So yeah, there's a kind of ever-evolving number of these.
Yeah, which does also feel kind of tarot-y in a way. But the one that was really interesting to me, because I did a lot of, I mean, I'm in grad school for literature, so I've done a lot of literary theory, but the narrator is so interesting to me. That's one of the most interesting parts of literature to me. And so seeing like a
Oh, sorry, I lost you.
Yeah. I think you froze, Virginia.
Have we frozen? No, I haven't frozen.
You're back.
You're back.
Okay. So what were other questions? We have like a laundry list of questions, like a long grocery list of questions. One of them was, so like, if you could, for those unfamiliar who might be listening to this now or later, could you maybe list a couple and like summarize a couple of the recurring characters?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so who are some good ones to compare? I feel like the diarist is quite a kind of a good introduction. That was the first character I did. And like I said, this is the person who is kind of ever trying to find like meaning and content and narrative in their life. And some very kind of obvious examples of this in like popular culture would be like Bridget Jones, Carrie Bradshaw, even Hannah Horvath. Like this is a character that we're like very familiar with in this kind of era of, or like especially millennial culture is almost like the crux of the diarist's reign. Like that is when she or he was at their peak. But then I also look at some kind of historical characters who maybe, for example, the diarist, the person who kind of got me interested in this archetype was Anais Nin, who is also ironically kind of having her own like Substack rebirth at the moment, it seems like. And then so that one's a little bit more kind of like cross media. And then there would be the branded couple, who are a bit more, I guess, rooted in like social observation and a bit more like hyper local to me in London. Most of the characters are quite like global, or at least like Western, in like their recognizability. But I am very, very interested in hyperlocalism, and I tend to be drawn to writers or creators who are very good at like essentially creating a bit of a time capsule of a time and place, whether that's like Bret Easton Ellis for like the 1980s, or I was actually reading at the time I was I guess like establishing recurring character. I was very interested in Roland Barthes and mythologies, and I guess it also is, I was quite interested in creating like a contemporary online version of mythologies, which is essentially a kind of index of myths that like especially kind of wealthy white people were perpetuating in Barthes' time. He wanted to kind of like give space to talk about them and analyze them. And I just think there's so many myths happening around us that weren't being captured in the way that I felt like they should be. And the branded couple is really doing that for, essentially it's like a kind of hyper cool, but ultimately very like brand oriented couple. And the kind of branded nature could be about the literal brands they're buying. In this, we talk about a lot of like, for example, Scandinavian brands, like Hay, but also like the idea of the couple as a brand as well, and the couple as a kind of what I see as almost like an aesthetic arrangement of like that dating apps have maybe resulted in, this idea of looking like the right couple, or essentially entering into a kind of a partnership or arrangement that is about accessing a home you want, a dog you want, a kid you want, the right signifiers of a specific aspirational lifestyle, and also how that's driving a nature of overconsumption. So there are a lot of things that come up again and again, like conformity is one of them. The branded couple is very conformist, but then I'll also explore characters who are kind of at their core very anti-conformist. So recently I was looking at the English eccentric as a character, who is someone who is like essentially rebellious to the conformities of Englishness. But ironically as well, all of these kind of non-conformists are like non-conforming together. So they also make a community, which is like the inherent irony of it all. And then I guess you also asked me in the earlier, and so maybe this is a good time to mention it, like the character I identify with most, which I think is this is a piece from 2025, the end of 2025, where I explored the eternal adolescent character, which was actually only one part, which is interesting because most of my pieces tend to be in 2 or even 3 parts. And the eternal adolescent feels actually like it's got way more to it that I'll probably explore at a later date. But in this kind of one-parter, I was looking at like essentially our kind of modern preoccupation with like possibility and opportunity, and our inability to make decisions, and how this is potentially in some ways stunting us and turning us into these eternal adolescents. Key characters would be people like Frances Ha, Yuli from Worst Person in the World, Fleabag. But I think this one was really key for me because I'm 32, and I feel like I was also kind of I've been experiencing almost like a delayed coming of age, or I feel like the eternal adolescent is a character that I am embodying right now. I guess partly because I've been experiencing some things that people normally experience when they're a lot younger for the first time, things like heartbreak or like mental health crises, unemployment, even like publishing my writing online, which feels like a very kind of 18-year-old newly formed poet thing to do. But it's taken me to my 30s to do it, as well as like maybe more fun things like dyeing my hair, learning to drive. So it's been interesting having these kind of delayed experiences at the same time that people I know are like buying houses and getting married and having kids. But at the same time, I can see this like what I'm kind of terming like age dysmorphia or like cultural agelessness that's very prominent in like urban centers like London and New York, Berlin especially, in which people are kind of holding on to youth for like dear life. And I'm really wondering what that means about like the future and birth rates and everything like that. So that's a bigger kind of trends piece I'm currently exploring that I think is also probably a way to like validate and understand like my own experience in my 30s.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, I love Frances Ha so much. It's such a fun movie. I'd say, well, it makes me kind of sad when I watch it, but like in a good way, to be honest. Hi, Ishmael.
Hi, Ishmael.
It's actually such a like Substack cliche to be obsessed with Frances Ha, which is
I know. I haven't watched it in a minute. There's like certain movies that I like to watch during transitional periods of my life. So like when I last moved, like I was super into Frances Ha in Brooklyn. Like Brooklyn is a movie that I was obsessed with when I was going to undergrad, when I was going into my master's, when I was going into my PhD, and when I moved. And it's like every time there's some sort of transitional thing, for some reason the movie Brooklyn is just like in my soul. I don't know. Well, I do know why, because it's a movie about difficult transitions. But I did want to ask, just because it's like a personal interest, is how conformist versus non-conformist would you say the femcel type, the femcel recurring character is?
Yeah, good question. I love the femcel. That's a favorite of mine. I would say it's hard because I feel like socially and kind of historically and politically maybe she feels like anti-conformist and rebellious and almost quite radical in kind of not refusing, because that makes it seem voluntary, and what I'm talking about is involuntary celibacy. But this idea of like not kind of conforming to being a like sensual woman who finds herself in relationships and marriages and is seen as a kind of sexual object, that feels anti-conformist and rebellious to me. So I think she does feel like a non-conformist character, but at the same time I think a lot of the way that the femcels have kind of collectivized online, and the kind of ideologies that a lot of them are sharing does feel like they're kind of borrowing terms from each other, and actually they feel quite the femcel to me feels very out of touch with her own body and feels very disembodied. And I think that is a very online that's a very common internet experience for people who spend a lot of their time online. And I think there's a kind of wider cultural phenomenon and maybe problem, this like disembodiment that a lot of us are feeling. But yeah, so I feel like that to me feels kind of conformist, because it's like this idea of being very like in tune with the different rhythms of the internet, as opposed to like actually being in tune with yourself and thinking for yourself. track for you, Virginia? Because I know you've written about femcel culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always the difference between like true femcells and post femcells, or like aesthetically, because like the aesthetic side of it, I would say is just 100% conformist. It's just like brat or whatever. You know, it's like pretty. There's a pretty standardized thing when you think about like as soon as somebody's familiar with like femcel core or like all the post femcel, it's like, oh yeah, they like Lana Del Rey, they like certain. But the actual femcel is like the quote unquote true femcel is a little bit difficult to pin down, just because it is like the involuntary celibate but female. But they do congregate. Like you're exactly right. I lurked on r/true femcells for a long time, and while they do congregate, like some of them fall into certain cultural patterns. There's the ones who go for r/vindicta, which is like the female looks maxing subreddit, or really subculture. But then there's some who would just seem like unwell. Like there's some who just seem to pop in with a single post venting about some very strange thing. There was one I remember, and I don't but just because True Femcells was kind of like enclosed on purpose, I don't tend to like share screenshots or something. I didn't really take any, but I recall one young woman. I think she was high school senior, maybe, or like freshman in college. She posted about how like there was a guy she liked, and so she like looked through his laptop to see what he had said about her, and she found something insulting about her. And everybody was like, hey, I think you probably shouldn't be going through people's laptops. It's very so like in that way she's a nonconformist, but not in a virtuous sense, just in a like there's something clearly a little bit off about this woman. And
the going through of the laptop is really interesting, because that feels like I was reading a really interesting essay about like how surveillance culture kind of plays into this like sex recession or like sexlessness of the next generation, and that feels like a really big theme, this idea of people are very worried about like exposure, and that feels like at the heart of a lot of why people are like not having as much sex or not feeling sexual. But it also kind of is a kind of inherent contradiction, because a lot of people, mostly women, feel kind of like are feeling these entitlement to people's digital footprints. For example, show me your phone, show me your text, show me your whereabouts, everything like that, which is kind of like making everything a lot less like erotic, essentially, and creating a lot of questions about who gets to decide what is considered like entitlement to someone's body.
And like bringing it back to Roland Barthes, I think it's in The Pleasure of the Text, he talks about like eroticism being like the flash of something being revealed, like a little bit of thigh showing kind of thing. And so when every secret is unveiled, it's kind of like the erotic is, in his, I guess, terms, definitionally gone. So like if you can find out exactly what this guy has said about you, then like that's bye eroticism. It's at that point it's just like I guess one could make the distinction between like erotic and pornographic to some extent. But Ishmael asks, do you think femceldom is primarily fueled by anti-male sentiment or some sort of deeper malaise? I'll throw that one over to you.
I think it's a deeper malaise. I think there's definitely some anti-male sentiment. Or I think there's a really interesting I feel like a lot of kind of femcel culture, and maybe talking here a bit more about like the femcel culture that is a bit more invisible, because it doesn't have the signifiers of femceldom, like the aesthetic or even the Lana Del Rey, but like is a kind of a literal involuntary celibacy, or like the unhappily single woman is something that I talk about in the episode. And I think here I do think there's this culture of like women just being very I guess like uninterested in like the male mindset, or like the male species, even on like a friendship level. And I think that might be like, there is, I guess, some kind of anti-male sentiment there that is maybe not, it doesn't feel misandrist necessarily, but it does feel like there maybe isn't as much kind of curiosity in men, which is maybe making this issue of unhappy singledom even worse, because you kind of that Emma Garland, who's a writer I follow and I really enjoy her work. She wrote a piece about this recently as well, where she talked about how a lot of kind of gender femcel discussion, or like women talking about men, gender dynamics discourse online at the moment feels very almost like fueled by narcissism, and actually it's like this very it all has to be about me, or like, how much are they spending on a date, how much are they paying for my date, or how many questions are they asking me. And it feels like we're losing a lot of like, just like genuine curiosity in like humans, or like another person, and it all feels very painted with a kind of broad brushstroke of like men versus women. And I think it's coming from a place of deeper malaise, but it's just like manifesting. It just appears to be manifesting in this kind of anti-male sentiment. And actually Love Island is very interesting to bring up there as well, because it's very interesting to be watching it 8 years later, with a completely new generation of people, and obviously completely new dating standards, completely new way of viewing relationships and intimacy. And it's so clear that like there is this huge gulf between the way that the women are expecting the men to act and the way that the men are actually acting. And that's kind of, I almost feel like it's going to draw the TV show into the ground, because it's like it can't function if like the women are just kind of being like, fuck this, like none of the guys, I don't like any of the guys, so then like the whole premise of the show doesn't work. So it's just very interesting to see how these are playing out in what is a very kind of like obvious example of popular culture, and for England as well, probably quite a very like almost like the everyday like person, the younger person, and how they're experiencing gender dynamics.
Yeah, there's a lot of complication, and there's also a lot of like kind of absurd I don't know, it does seem oftentimes like the terminally online people of both sexes aren't talking to the other sex. So you see this thing of like incel types saying like all attractive women get, whatever this means, flown out to Miami, as in like they're getting flown out to like some wealthy dude's parties or whatever. And I've known plenty of attractive women, and they're not getting flown out to Miami. But it seems like there's just this massive disconnect between reality and this sort of gender discourse sometimes. To the point where, I mean, a lot of incels, femcels, could definitely get a partner if they lost their weird views of the opposite sex, to be honest. Like, there maybe more. I mean, femcels ironically tend to post fewer pictures of themselves than incels do, in my experience.
Interesting.
And I think it's because they're actually more self-conscious. I don't know if that tracks numerically, but like true femcels, or sometimes even Vindicta or wherever, not many selfies, but then if you go to like incel forums, which I don't tend to do, but there's a large selfie culture of guys posting a selfie, and then other guys telling him like with that jawline, like you'll never have a life or whatever. And it's like oddly there's not as much of that on the femcel side, but like I'm pretty sure it tracks there too,
There's what you said just now as well about the they could probably like almost find kinship in each other, reminds me of an episode of Nymphet Alumni, which is actually, that's something I've been listening to a lot recently, and I'm kind of late to Nymphet Alumni. I remember someone telling me about it years ago, and just not getting on with it. And now I'm just like, oh my God, these girls are so clever and I'm so obsessed with it. It's like a fashion and culture podcast, kind of analyzing, a lot that they analyze a lot of like aesthetics and image, which feels really important right now. But they had an episode recently on romanticy, and they talked about how romanticy is female gooning. And like reading fairy smut or like stories about these like monsters that will like rip your bodice off is like the literal female equivalent of boys in their gooning cave. And actually they could maybe just like get like if the girls put the books down and the boys put the like screens down, like they could just be happily paired off.
Yeah, so it's like post femcel gooning versus the birth rate kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people, like, I know there's debate about the term addiction or whatever, but for smut type content, whether it's visual or books, like some people seem to have a very hard time letting go of it. And like, I won't go into detail about experiences I've had with guys in that, but like some of them really, it seems like an ingrained part of certain people's lives in a way that's like sort of scary, actually. It's almost more like a hobby for certain people. Because like romanticy in particular, it's like people, there's booktubers, who will give recommendations for the best either romanticy or dark romance or whatever, so it's sort of like a way of life in a certain way, which does kind of make me pessimistic about the human race to some extent. But yeah, it's difficult to think about that and not be a little bit bummed out. But so the femcel, so I'm pretty convinced that like femcels aren't totally parallel to incels, but there was this, I don't know, have you ever come across the pink pill or like pink pill content?
Yeah.
It's
in my
very
research for the femcel, I did,
it's very that is very parallel to incel stuff, where it's like the sort of pseudoscientific, like phrenological, basically, perspective on men.
Like
there's
because that's all about beauty standards, isn't it? It's like women perpetuating those beauty standards by thinking that only the hottest, like perfect women get men, and like misunderstanding the way love works.
It's interesting though that both groups are specifically looking at hot women as the problem, whether you're a man or a woman. And it's like interesting that that's where they gravitate.
True. Hot women are the modern villains.
Yeah, and I mean they're taken as very frustrating by both sides. I think the femcels tend to seem like they kind of reinvent radical feminism sometimes, but they still have a lot of resentment toward women they view as like more attractive than them, in a way that's kind of disturbing. But it goes back to the thing of like femcels, incels don't seem to talk to the opposite sex ever. Because like, I don't know, I grew up in a rural area. Like most of the people, one doesn't see a model walking around in rural southern America, and everybody still gets married. Like there's a lot of pressure.
More people get married.
Yeah, exactly.
More people get married in rural areas than urban centers, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't need to be the most attractive person, and then incels will say that that's like a fake love or something like that, but it's like not really. I don't know. I mean, is love that's based on being quote unquote looks matched more authentic? Like what does that even, I don't know. There's so much weird, like it's the worst kind of gender swap, because it's the type of gender swap that can only be produced if you were like raised at a monastery and never have.
Oh no, I've lost Virginia again.
Yeah. Rose again.
Anticlimax.
I know she had such a great
What's the end of the sentence?
Going too, exactly.
Yeah, I have once again frozen.
Yeah,
but you're back.
I don't know. My internet has been kind of spotty, I guess. But I remember incels idolizing this old like newspaper story of
Oh
Oh
no.
no.
Oh no. Oh, Virginia.
She'll be back.
Yeah, she will. She always has such great thoughts too. It's so sad she's interrupted.
Yeah, I am. I thought it would be my internet today. My internet sometimes, when I need it most, disappears. But it's been okay.
Yeah, my internet. I don't like Spectrum. But anyway, since I'm keep freezing up, Forrest, why don't you take it away with more questions?
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, I was curious, kind of pulling it back to kind of the bigger question of kind of how people approach like types and character types. And we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but just that issue of like people tend to kind of be resentful of the idea of like a trope, for example. And I think some of that probably has to tie in with maybe just they're kind of viewing a trope as something that's been flattened. But what do you think is maybe people's biggest like resistance to the idea of tropes, and what do you think they're missing by discarding types and tropes?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the gendered stuff like gets people's goats. I think that's always going to be the case. But like the thing is, I'm just really that's just the reason I'm writing about it is because I'm interested in it, and I feel like, you know, write about what you're excited about or like annoyed about. Otherwise, you know, sometimes I'll try to write a character piece that just feels very that I feel like I should be writing, but feels very difficult for me to access any sort of like personal feelings about, and it just doesn't work at all. But yeah, I do think people, especially like the branded couple piece, actually, I feel like that was, you know, potentially a bit close for comfort for some people I know, or like people in my kind of outer friendship circle. And I think people, I guess, just don't like feeling like someone is saying that they don't have, you know, an individuality or mind of their own, and they're just kind of like following the crowd or being a sheep of sorts, and buying their way to a personality. And coming at it from a trends background as well, I've noticed that even, you know, telling people I work in trend forecasting over the years or having conversations about trends, sometimes people, you know, are just interested, and maybe people don't agree with it and they don't like it, and they don't like that it's, you know, has a role in capitalism, because it probably does, which is fair, and I can have an interesting conversation with them about that. But like sometimes people just, I don't know, kind of want to remove themselves from it completely and be like, I don't follow trends, I don't do that. And, you know, you want to bring up the Miranda Priestley blue cerulean blue meme. Like everyone does. Because that's very true. But yeah, I think it's just interesting. I guess like something I've been like wary of is that I do like content that feels like it's observing very carefully movements or subcultures that are happening, and zeroing in on them and questioning them, and, you know, threatening them in some sort of, you know, exposing way, but that feels very exciting to me because it feels like I'm seeing it and no one else is talking about it. But when I notice platforms doing that, let's say in the UK, or actually in the US as well, we had Vice a few years ago, who I think were kind of doing this, and Dazed kind of dips its foot into this as well, and sometimes very successfully. And yeah, sometimes I notice that these platforms are, you go on the comments and people are just like tearing the writer apart, or like tearing this apart and being like, how dare you, or I feel threatened, blah, 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 or just saying that it's not proper journalism or whatever it might be. And I guess that has always made me confused, because I feel like that's the most exciting part of, that's the most exciting writing that I'm seeing right now, and that feels the most, if it feels kind of dangerous, then I think it's like doing something right. if it's getting people annoyed, it's doing something right. That's something I felt actually about Rejection by Tony Toluthmute, the book of short stories, which was published last year, but I think about all the time. And I think he is playing very hard and fast with tropes and cliches and stereotypes. And one story is about an incel, one's about a femcel, one's about a tech bro, one's about a kind of virtue signaling non-binary person. There's all these different characters that feel like modern archetypes, and he is satirizing them like crazy. But it and I loved it, and because it's made for me, and I think he's so clever, and I thought it was so funny and well done. But it's been very interesting to see people not enjoy it and people be offended or upset by it, and I'm like, that makes me realize that it's a important and like necessary artifact than I even realized. So I think basically what I'm trying to say is that I would like to annoy people, but I'm still like, I still have quite a small audience and quite a kind of like, I guess, loyal, dedicated small but dedicated following who like understand and believe in the project. And one thing I've been aware of in terms of trying to market it to more people, or try to get it published with like media platform or whatever it might be, is I'm very aware that that these things could aggravate people. So right now it's just reaching people who are interested in it. But yeah, I guess at some point I'm going to get trolled.
Yeah.
And I hope it happens.
You'll know you're doing something right.
I succeeded.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost at time. Virginia, you seem to be sticking with us. Did you have any final questions before we wrap up?
Why God? No. Well, one thing that's interesting briefly is just the idea of tropes, and it's like the idea of originality, or like the virtue of originality, is relatively recent. Like in the Renaissance, it was like, how well can you imitate Cicero was like a mark of quality. So I think like, yeah, there's something valuable about tropes that I think a lot of people don't recognize. And I mean, in the Jewish world, it's technically a different world, but trope refers to like the tune by which you chant Torah. And so there's like, when I hear trope, like half of my brain is like literary or like tvtropes.com type thing, and then the other half is like, oh yes, Ashkenazi trope or Sephardic trope or whatever. But no, otherwise, I mean, yeah, it is about time to wrap up. Apologies for the internet issues. I'll blame demons, as is trendy now. And where can people find you on social media?
I mean, mostly on recurringcharacter.substack.com. Yeah, that's kind of where I post everything, the essays and the podcast episodes. You can also find the podcast on Spotify. And I am on Instagram at Holly Curls. It is mostly a personal account, but at some point I will be creating a recurring character Instagram, I think. I've kind of been resisting it, but I feel like it's kind of necessary. But yeah, Substack is mostly where you can find me.
Gotcha. Cool. And we were talking before going on about Forrest and I finding recurring character like addictive reading and listening.
I love that.
So anyone who will be hearing this or is hearing this right now should absolutely get addicted, because it's great stuff. So, all right.
Please,
are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah, if you have characters to suggest, send them to me, because I really want to make this, like I said, like a collective world building project in some way.
Very good. Cool. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you again, Holly.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.